Batman City of Crime is a story that takes place during the issues of Detective Comics number 800 through 808, and then 811 through 814. If you're wondering, the issues in between are a part of the War Crimes storyline, which is like an epilogue to War Games. These issues were released over the course of roughly a year from November of 04 to December of 05. The gist of the story is that Batman got roped into a big conspiracy that originated with the disappearance of a young pregnant girl. As the story progresses, villains like Penguin, Ventriloquist, and Mr. Freeze get involved, and Batman finds out there is a greater organization pulling the strings behind the scenes. As a heads up, I'm going to be spoiling the story, so just keep that in mind when you keep on watching this video. It's written with some covers and layouts done by David Lapham, who is best known for writing and illustrating the comic series Stray Bullets. Unfortunately, I'd say the story feels very overwritten and just longer for the sake of being long. I don't think it really lives up to the standard that David Lapham has had with stories like Stray Bullets. The pacing fluctuates dramatically, the mystery plot ends very suddenly and kind of lazily, and the characterization is very odd at points. Starting with stretching for time and writing overall, there are points where things are clicking for me personally, and it's a real page-turner. For a few issues, I didn't feel like putting the story down. The story is a lot more of a crime drama or a thriller than a lot of your average Batman capers were at the time, especially following up something like War Games, which was more of a big action brawl than anything real detective-y, for lack of a better term. And the detective aspects is probably one of the strongest things this book has going for it. You have Batman going around getting leads, collecting evidence, following tips that he gets, investigating certain areas. One of the main recurring issues with the writing, though, is the abundance of narration boxes, most of them doing their best Frank Miller impression, talking about the city and personifying it. A prime example of this being the first issue in this story. About half of the issue is just dedicated to the narration trying to tell you how dirty, dark, and dangerous Gotham City is, when, one, if you're an avid Batman reader, you don't need to be reminded of that. And if you're a newer reader, I don't think you really need as much as it's giving you to comprehend and accept that the city is like this. And as it progresses, it really feels like the narration is just spinning its wheels and repeating a lot of what it already said earlier. It also feels like it's just trying too hard to be grim at some points. Another example of the story seemingly padding for time is around the halfway point, we sort of switch the main setting that the current story is taking place in. In the initial issue of this swap in settings, we spend a fair amount of time establishing the area and introducing people that live in here and seeing a bit of the average slice of life for people that live in this part of town. But after that one issue, about 85% of those characters have no real impact on the plot or don't even return in some cases. Throughout this portion of the story, Bruce does a lot of undercover investigating while Tim holds down the fort downtown. And at this point, Tim is basically just sitting on the sideline waiting for Bruce's plot to progress so Tim can actually do stuff. Although, to be fair, Tim doesn't really get too much to do in this story to begin with. As I said, we are undercover with Bruce in this point in the story, and I really like seeing Bruce do those type of things with his whole Matches Malone persona, even though he doesn't use that in this story. The problem with its execution in this is after a few issues worth of story, his investigation doesn't really inform him of anything that he didn't already know in the first issue. Which brings me to the plot involving the secret organization and the mystery behind that. The mystery aspect starts off relatively strong but ends up being handled very poorly at the end. As I said, the main plot revolves around Bruce looking for a missing pregnant girl, and that opens up a whole web of things involving the Ventriloquist, Mr. Freeze, and the Penguin. Batman goes around looking for answers to this missing persons case, and he finds all these mysterious things that connect to something potentially even greater on the food chain than these three. The name of the organization is revealed to be The Body, and they really start to creep their heads in around just past the first quarter mark of this. The Body presents a semi-invasion of the Body Snatchers type of plot. Throughout the story, the organization replaces people with dirt duplicates of themselves that retain their looks and their memories to an extent. This is used to throw in plenty of twists and turns, which are effective, but the mystery really unravels the more it gets dug into. Once Bruce really starts to get into it, he learns about the man who smiles too much, which of course makes you think that the Joker might be involved, but it's really just some random guy. Bruce doesn't really learn much about him over the course of his investigation that he didn't already know at the start of the investigation. The man who smiles too much is revealed to be the leader of this organization, but we don't know anything about him aside from him being an important member of the group. We're not told where the magic dirt that creates replicants of people comes from, or how the duplicates are even made. They're just there already. We also aren't told what the Body's motives are. They're just a generic group that want to take over Gotham and are secretly pulling the strings and taking over from within. A minor character that also shows up halfway through the story is a crazy homeless man who once was a very successful lawyer. As the story progresses, we find out he is slightly connected to the Body, but he isn't necessarily working for them. We're also told that he can generate a sense of fear, like a fear toxin type thing, but he doesn't do it intentionally either, and we aren't told how he got this ability or what exactly it is. Both the plotline involving him and the Body are taken care of in the very last issue. It's not like a gradual progression of events that helps take him down. It's all contained within one issue, really. It really comes off as if Lapham had the idea for this group, but he never really got too far into the story that he had laid out for them, or it comes off like he was just really rushed by editorial or something. And we're also told the truth at the very end, what happened to the missing pregnant girl that kicked off this entire event. And between finding out what happened to her and all the stuff with the Body, the ending of this book really makes me feel like I just wasted my time reading it, honestly. It also doesn't help that the Body as an organization has never been addressed or brought back in any way after this story. For characterization, Bruce is pretty okay overall. He's definitely a lot better and more consistent than he was in War Games, but a lot of that has to do probably with him being written by only one guy for this entire story. We avoid the Bat God qualities that the character has unfortunately picked up over the last 10 to 15 years or so. Bruce is very humanized in this story, feeling like an actual person for the most part. Tim, on the other hand, is written very oddly in this. He feels a lot more immature than he tends to be written in various books. Even compared to the most recent storyline in War Games, Tim feels very adolescent in this. He feels like someone that is just becoming a teenager, maybe. And he also seems to act a bit more like a Dick Grayson Robin in this compared to how Tim is in many of the other major Batman storylines. This Tim is kind of just like a wisecracking, fun teenage sidekick for the most part. Regarding the characterization of other big-named characters in this, Penguin's good. He's a solid character as far as his depiction goes. I'd say he's on par with any Chuck Dixon or any other late 80s to 90s era Penguin stories. Ventriloquist is handled pretty well in here. He's not in this as much as I personally would like him to be, but when he is here, he's delivered pretty well. Mr. Freeze in this is a real wacko, for a lack of a better term. He's kind of like an unhinged man, and they sort of connect this to the Nora Freeze storyline in a way, but it's done very half-heartedly and explained in a kind of throwaway line of exposition. There isn't anything about this that really feels like it had to be Mr. Freeze for this storyline to work. It just comes off as... It just feels like somebody involved in this story to some extent wanted another big-name Batman villain involved, so they took out whoever was initially this character and just pushed Freeze in the spot. The one consistently really good thing about this storyline is the art. Ramon Box is the penciler. He is best known probably for his time on Civil War tie-ins around this period. If you're a really big Star Wars comic fan, he also penciled Open Seasons, the Jango Fett origin story. As far as Batman stuff is concerned, he worked on some of the Michael Lane Azrael books, Red Robin, and stuff as recent as Robin, Son of Batman. His art really works for the material that he's given. It's very grounded, gritty, the detail's good. There are a few panels here and there where things look a little off-model, but there isn't any point in this story where the art completely took me out, or where I looked at the art and just thought it wasn't good. The color palette is also pretty similar to how War Games was, lots of focus on shades of brown, red, yellow. A lot of this, of course, has to do with Jason Wright, who was the colorist on both books, and Jason Wright worked on plenty of Bat family-related titles in the 2000s. So if you aren't interested in the story at least, I'd say go and just look up some panels from this book because there are plenty of nice pieces of art involved in this. So the story is a lot like War Games. It's a pretty mixed bag for me. Both stories sort of leave me on a sour note, but at least with War Games, the ending of that has the benefit of having its big emotional climax point being retconned at a later point, where this, on the other hand, nobody's bothered touching or acknowledging this ever since it was put on shelves. I'd say only check this out if you're that curious in the story itself, or if you're a completionist who wants to go through everything. I think the first half is very strong, but unfortunately it kind of ends with a thud, and doesn't really entice me to go back and reread it. With that being said, thank you for checking out this video. If you're a Batman fan, a DC, Marvel, Dark Horse, just a comic fan in general, if you're into Star Wars or other things along those lines, please like, subscribe, share, comment, all that fun algorithm boosting stuff. And I will have more fun videos similar to this, hopefully about stuff that I like more, coming to you in the near future. Thank you, and I'll see you guys in the next video.